Hello, everyone, and welcome to Combat COVID-19 Community Support. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a great presentation from Dr. Amy Stoeber called In This Together, Managing Chaos and Creating Resilient Children. But we did want to tell you a little bit about Combat COVID-19 and advancing. There we go. So we are an informal coalition of healthcare providers and other community leaders in Central Oregon. We're working together to produce a series of live stream video events and virtual groups focused on caring for you and your family's health during the pandemic. So we did want to give a quick plug for some of the other live events we have happening this week. On Thursday, if you're struggling with sleep or anxiety during COVID-19, please join us and Dr. Jason Prinster to talk about how to manage that and tips to help with that. Friday at 10 a.m., we have a special session focused on older adults and some of their worries. And Friday at 2 o'clock, if you or a family member has diabetes, we've got Dr. Travis Mosho, endocrinologist here in Central Oregon, who's going to be talking about how to care for your health at home during COVID. And we're posting more live events every single day, so please go to our Facebook page to see the schedule. So before we get started, my lawyer said we have to go over this very boring disclaimer, so bear with us for just one moment. But this event is provided only for informational. It's not offered as medical advice or medical opinions. You should not treat this event as a substitute for professional medical advice or medical care. If you require assistance with any mental health or medical issue, please contact your healthcare provider. We make no guarantees or warranties of any kind, express or implied. Okay, and with that, I am so excited to introduce a very special friend and colleague of mine, Dr. Amy Stoeber. She's got a great presentation for you today. I did want to tell you that we have about 30 to 30 minutes of content available for you today. And then Dr. Amy's agreed to do some Q&A with our audience. So please feel free to type in questions as we go along. We'll be saving those questions for the end, and Dr. Amy can get to those. And with that, I'll hand it over to Dr. Stoeber.
Wonderful. Let me just pull up my screen so all of you can see it. All right. Okay, here we go. So I have been, as you can imagine, fielding a ton of questions in this past couple of weeks about how we manage chaos and create resilient children. And I've actually started to replace the word uncertain or the phrase uncertain times with a crisis, because I am a state and national expert on crisis and resilience building. And truly, we are in a crisis right now. So I want to just overview a couple of things that I'm going to cover today. I know there are people managing the chat box. I'm really glad you're all here, whether you're joining live or you're joining later in the taped recording. I want to do a couple of things. First of all, I want to provide this space with some free guidance for you. I'm really thankful that Dawn put this event together and that we have this space that you can have some information for you at your fingertips. I'm going to overview for you what I'm hearing from other parents, teachers, community members about the top stressors that you're all facing. There are a lot of common themes that come up that I've heard from people over the last several weeks. We're going to address parental stress, anxiety, and the pressure you're all facing right now to wear all the hats. And we're going to talk about how to build structure for you and your family, because creating structure and consistency and predictability actually creates more resilience in our families. And then finally, we're fostering a sense of connection here with the COVID-19 group here that Dawn and her group has created. I'm wanting to let you all know that it's okay to not be okay right now. And what I meant earlier when I said I've been replacing that phrase uncertain times with crisis, we really are in this unprecedented time. There is no script, there is no rule book, and everybody's doing the best they can. So as we go throughout today, I want you to put up questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. There are no wrong ones, because we don't have all the right answers right now. We just have what we can do in the right now. And I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. So I'm also going to introduce some other ways to support all of you, and then we'll move into our live Q&A. So this is what I'm hearing from everybody right now. As I talk to parents, I work with a lot of teachers and medical providers as well. who also wear those hats of parents. And this is what I'm hearing from all of you. First of all, you're stressed and anxious about what's going on right now, and you want tools to decrease anxiety for you and your children. I think right now we're in this environment where there's tons of free resources being sent to you. If you're like me, you're getting things from, Scholastic News and universities that are offering some free classes, and all the public education systems and online learning systems. But that's very different than having practical, actionable tools, or where do we pool all of those resources to actually feel like they're actionable for us? So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. I also want to talk to you about how you can create boundaries. You're living in this little four-walled home or apartment or wherever you're living right now, and you're together all of the time. And I actually had this realization earlier today, like I think I'm running a boarding school, because I'm doing the education, I'm cooking all the meals, I'm providing all the socialization, I'm providing housing, I'm providing all the outings and all the entertainment. So I actually am running a boarding school here at home, or a residential treatment facility, depending on the day. So I just want to acknowledge that we are really trying hard to manage this work-life balance from home. Also, I know a lot of you have concerns about losses during this time, whether it be macro level losses like our economy and the national health pandemic, or smaller things like the school structure. One of my friend's daughter is celebrating a birthday today. So many of you have had milestones that you've celebrated in quarantine, jobs that you've lost, family members' health, and just connection to other people. So what I'm really hearing from parents is that you need information, action, and practical tools, not just a bunch of free resources and websites. So this is about how to stay positive and create motivation for your kids. And the most consistent ask that I'm hearing is you want these practical tools in order to feel sane, so that you can balance both being now your kid's homeschool teacher as well as their parent, and keep your sanity at the same time. So I want to just emphasize we're all in this together, and I'm here to be a support and a guide for you during this time. And so I want to really give you some practical strategies today. Here's something that you can do right away, right? If you leave today's, webinar, and these are the 5 things you really focus on, you'll be in for a good win. And that is, I want you to first engage in self-care. And I know that those of you that are parents, you're already like, rolling your eyes, and you're like, of course, everybody's telling me to take care of myself right now, but I don't have time to do that. And what I hope to impress on you today is that you don't have time not to take care of yourself either. I've been on phone calls this week with medical providers and teachers and administrators and parents. And I want you to think more so like this is a marathon. We keep getting information that we're going to be under quarantine longer, that schools are getting canceled through the rest of the year. And so I want you to think in terms of marathon training, not sprint training. Okay. We're in this for the long run. We're in to do this for a long period of time. And so if you're not engaging in self-care, you're going to burn out. You're going to be overwhelmed. You're going to feel resentful. And that's not the best way that you can support your kids and your family. So I'm going to give you some practical things that you can do here in just a moment to engage in that self-care. The second thing I want you to do is limit media exposure. And what I mean by that is, we have this world that we create, this 24-hour news cycle. And so one of the things that we learned from, for instance, the 9/11 experience, I was a practicing graduate student psychologist at the time, and kids actually thought that multiple buildings were getting hit in multiple cities across the country and across the world, because they were watching their parents ingest this 24-hour media cycle, and they couldn't differentiate between what was happening right now and what their parents were watching a taped version of. And so fast forward now, it's, been 19 years later, and we have so much media at our fingertips. We have media on the TV. Our kids are on social media. We have, computers and tablets and constant scrolls at the bottom of our screens. I really would like you to take chunks of time and just choose a half-hour news source that you're going to watch a day, or maybe a 1-hour news programming source. Get the facts and then move away from the media exposure. Now, that doesn't replace number 3 here, which is continue to have conversations with your kids. I want you to have really deep, meaningful conversations with your children because they don't have the capacity to ingest all of this information. cognitively, they may understand that we're in a crisis or there's been a pandemic or, we're in this state of quarantine, but their social emotional skills are still really limited, whether they're 2 or 7 or 12 or 16. We need to continue to have conversations with them to be sure that they know how to digest this information, that you check with them for understanding. And if you need more help with that, you can actually go to my website, which I put on the last slide here, or we can put in the comment section, which is www.dramyllc.com. And on my blog, there's a free blog there that you can download and get actual scripts and how to talk to kids about these conversations. So there are dialogues written out for you by different developmental ages, and you can just download it and use that as a way to talk to your kids. So hopefully that feels really practical for you. The fourth thing is I want you to reassure your children of safety. I know that for you in your adult mind, you can imagine all of the worst case scenarios, right? You're worried maybe about your elderly parents. You're worried about your job. You're worried about the economy. You're worried about stocks that you've invested in. You're worried about what's going to happen next week for your kids' schooling and how you're going to manage all of those things. But kids need to know for their own reassurance and resilience building that you're doing the best you can to keep them safe every day. And so when you can reassure them that while the big world seems very scary right now, our home is a safe place. We're taking one day at a time, and maybe tell them 3 things that you're doing right now to keep them safe. So for instance, if it was me, I might say to my kids, we're staying home, we're limiting our trips to the grocery store. Anytime we get takeout or we bring groceries home, we wash hands, we make sure that we practice really healthy kind of precautionary behavior. And then finally, because we have somebody in our home who's a frontline worker, we're making sure that every time he comes home, that he changes his clothes, that he showers, et cetera, to keep all of us safe. So I try to really stick with like the 3 things we are doing to reassure our kids of safety. The last thing I want you to do is create a sense of structure and find playtime. So we're going to actually talk about that in just a minute. I'll forward my slide, but creating structure is one of the most important things we can do during a time of crisis for our children. When kids have structure, they have predictability and they have consistency. And so I'm going to give you some actionable tools here about how you can create that structure for your kids and for yourself. Really, what I want you to know is that the way that we're going to manage this chaos and crisis is through a mindset shift. We have to stop focusing on doing everything all of the time and focus just right now on the intentional decision about our present moment with each other and with our kids. When we do that, that's what really builds resilience for our children. So let me give you a practical tool. I want you to parent in the now. I want you to focus on what you can do right now. And here's the little analogy that I use. It's this really thing. I try to create as corny of titles as I can so that you're sure to remember it later. But this is called worry pie. And so if you can imagine that all of us have all of our worries contained in a pie, right? We have our past worries. Those are things that already happened. For instance, I was listening to the governor of New York City, and he was talking about how he wished he would have engaged in more PPE and more precautionary measures or shut down the city, sooner. But that worry doesn't actually help him in terms of actionable time right now. That's a past worry. Maybe some of you have past worries right now, like, gosh, I wish we would have stayed home sooner and quarantined ourselves, or I wish I would have, started working from home sooner, or I wish I would have got my parents into a safe, stable housing so that I could keep them safe in quarantine. I just want you to know that those past worries are things that have already occurred that we can't go back and change or do anything about. And I know we have a lot of mental energy we spend there, but I'm going to actually ask you to shift that. I'll come back to that in just a moment. The other type of worry we have is what's called a future worry. And boy, do we have tons of those right now, right? When will I go back to my job? When will the economy stabilize? When will I be able to get back to doing all the things that make my family, prosperous and happy and healthy? When do I just get to go to coffee with a girlfriend, right? All of those future worries that we are definitely hungry for and we want to have that time with, but it's unknown. And finally, the last type of worry we have is what we call out of control worry. And those worries are defined by 2 things: somebody else's behavior or a natural disaster or an event like we're having right now, like a pandemic. Anytime you try to control Mother Nature or somebody else's behavior, you're going to spend a lot of mental energy in a space that you can do nothing about, right? That's called an out of control worry. So if you're focused on somebody else's behavior, like I wish my boss would give me more clear instruction, or I wish my kids' teachers would send me more worksheets that we're supposed to be getting, or I wish that our governor would do more mandates about social distancing. All of those worries are actually worries that we can do nothing about because it's a natural disaster or a health pandemic, or it's somebody else's behavior. So now step back and look at the worry pie, okay? In actuality, about 75% of the time we're spending worried are things that we can do nothing about. It's a past worry, a future worry, or an out of control worry. And so you can guess now where I want you to focus, which is the right now. And so right now is what's happening in the present moment. So my only job right now is to be the best psychologist I can be for all of you watching live or watching later. If right now I'm worried about, okay, am I going to wear a mask when I go to the grocery store? Or, is my mom going to get sick later on? And has she been exposed? Or, what's happening with my kids in online learning? And are they going to actually have a good experience with the rest of their educational year? I'm not helping you because I'm taking energy from a bucket that I actually need, and I'm wasting it over here on energy of things that I can't control. So I want you to be focused on the right now. And I know that that's much easier said than done. But with time and with practice, you can actually catch yourself and get better at that. So when you find yourself having that mental energy of like, I wonder what's going to happen, or I wish this wouldn't have happened, or why doesn't so-and-so do this? I want you to catch that and go, okay, yeah, that's what Amy was talking about. I'm in that 75% of the worry pie that I can't do anything about. So I need to shift focus and just focus on the right now. Okay, so that's worry pie in a nutshell. I hope that feels like a really practical, actionable thing that you can do to contain some of the worry. Okay, let me talk about another concern or stressor that all of you have, and that is that all of a sudden you're homeschooling experts. You are not a homeschooling expert. You are a homeschooling crisis manager. That's what I want you to think of about yourself. You do not have to be a homeschooling expert. I do not want you on Instagram downloading all of the perfect matching color-coded charts for your kids. I don't want you all of a sudden I actually put a post up yesterday on Instagram that said, I won't remember all of it off the top of my head, but it said something like, we made a movie about how volcanoes work, and we created a math game with tons of incentives, and we ran our own science experience. Just kidding. I yelled at my kids and we cried twice. That's actually what happened in our homeschooling day. So I just want you to know that you're not a homeschooling expert, and you don't have to be. I want you to imagine that you're like using the duct tape approach to schooling right now. You're just doing what you need to do to get by. And when are you doing it? Right now. So in the moment, every morning I sit down with my kids. We go through their learning blocks, which I'm going to talk to you about in just a minute. We decide what they're going to do for that day, and we are super flexible. And if it happens, that's great. And if it doesn't, we forgive ourselves. So I'm going to talk to you in a moment in terms of what's reasonable and what expectations you should have, because you're not a teacher and we don't expect you to be. So what can some of that look like? Before I launch into that, I want to just impart something on all of you. And that is what we're doing here is we're trying to create greater bandwidth to build resilience and shifting our energy towards what we can do right now and forgiving ourselves for just simply doing the best we can. That's how we build resilience. And so if you look at this chart here, what you'll notice is that resilience is the ability to see challenges, something that's going on as a challenge rather than a hardship, and to be strengthened by it versus defeated by it. And that's that mindset shift from, okay, I don't have to do all the things. I don't have to be like a perfect homeschooling expert and the best parent and have all these Instagram worthy posts of my life that's happening right now. I just have to see this as I'm getting through the day. And we're all born with this capacity to be resilient. And hopefully what I'm doing is I'm teaching you and I'm modeling some ways to build that resilience, because I want you to know that your kids are going to look back at this time and they're going to remember how you handled this. And here's what I want to underscore. I'm not saying to you that your kids are going to look back and if you didn't do this perfectly, they're not going to be resilient. Actually, by being perfect, you're putting way too much pressure on yourself to get through a time of crisis. What your kids will remember most is how you handled the hardship. And so you're going to make mistakes. There's going to be days when you burn dinner. There's going to be days when you just don't feel like doing the homeschooling thing. There's going to be days when you're screaming at your kids while you're trying to be on a work call. There's going to be times when you're on a work call and your toddler's crawling into your lap. And I want you to be unapologetic about that. I want you to just embrace the fact that this is going to be imperfect. And the more that we embrace that just doing the best we can is going to be good enough, that actually will build resilience. Being perfect doesn't build resilience for kids. Being perfectly imperfect and being human and doing the best we can and showing our kids that we can continue to push through, even in a time when it's hard, and we show up and we do the best we can, that's what builds resilience. So, on that note, I want to let you know that it is okay for you to create boundaries. That's going to help you build some resilience for you and for your kids. So I'm going to talk about boundaries for you as a parent, and then I'm going to talk about some learning block boundaries that I think your kids can really relate to. So the first thing, remember I talked to you about your own self-care. I want you to use screens to your advantage. I get so many parents right now that are like, oh my gosh, Dr. Amy, my kids are on their screens all the time right now. They're on Fortnite, for 4 hours a day, and breathe. Okay. What I want you to know is that right now, kids, of course, are going to be on screens more because it's their way of being social. Okay. When you need to use screens to your advantage, if you need to get dinner made, or you want to just go take a long shower, or you want to focus on laundry, or you just need to walk outside to get a breath of fresh air, it's okay if your toddler watches Blue's Clues for a half an hour. It's okay if your middle schooler plays Fortnite with his friends for a little bit. Use that so you can use that time to go do a workout or go for a walk. Because remember, you're in this for the marathon, right? You need to find some ways that you can create structure and engage in really good self-care. I put this little last mark here about social distancing isn't just for the public, right? It's okay to be socially distant from your family. A little testimonial here. The other night, my daughter just completely lost it and broke down. And she said, I'm tired of you being my teacher and the chef and the director of everything. And I said, I totally get it. What do you need tonight? We were going to watch a movie as a family, and we ended up just scrapping that. And I said, do you want to just eat brownies and watch SVU in your bedroom and have some alone time? And she was like, yeah, I'm sick of all of you. And I was like, that's absolutely okay. And I tried to just meet her where she was and not take that personally. And I want to let you know that it's okay if you feel like that sometimes too. So if you can take time to set up a Zoom happy hour with a girlfriend or a guy friend, and just go to your bedroom for a little bit and have some adult time, that's all really good, because you can be socially distant but still connected to other people. The other thing I want to say about creating boundaries in terms of self-care are your work boundaries. So I know a lot of you right now are working from home. Maybe some of you are like work from home ninjas and you do this all the time and you're like, I got this down. But for most of us, even if you've been a work from home person, you haven't usually done it with kids at home. And now there's an extra group of us who've never done this work from home model. So I want to just be clear with your boundaries of when you're available and when you're not. Okay. So I'm trying not to set up meetings for myself before 10 o'clock, not because I'm lazy and can't get to work by 10 o'clock, but because I need to take care of myself. I need to get my kids set up with online learning, and then I can take care of other people. And so did you see how I created that hierarchy? Self-care, care for my family, then I'm engaging with work. Now, I know that might not be practical for all of you. So other ways that you can do that are creating physical boundaries in your home, right? Where you're like, okay, if I'm in the office, I'm at work. And actually, I've had some people put their business logo on the outside of the door so that if the door is closed and the business logo is on, their kids and their spouse or partner know it's not a good time to bother me because I'm actually at work. So you can create your own work blocks too and try to stick to those. Also, I think it's really important for us to turn off work, because you're working from home. It's easy to just go back and check an email, respond to another Zoom meeting, get back to a text. But then your family is going to have this tension where they're not really sure when you're available and when you're not. And because a lot of our meetings are happening here on our phones, it's even more confusing because we're saying to our kids, take a break from screen sometimes, but then we're on it and we're responding to work emails. So it's really important that you create maybe a physical space where you do your work, and then also let your kids and family members know when you're available and when you're not. And then when you're done, really turn off from that. That really helps our kids know what our expectations are for their behavior. And finally, having these boundaries where you structure your day for family time, alone time, school time, playtime. And so you have these blocks of time for yourself where truly you're able to just have some family time, know that, this is what we're doing at 7 o'clock. Yesterday we just all went on a walk outside because it was beautiful and sunny here in Portland and it hadn't been for a few days. So we just took a little bit of time and had some playtime as a family, but letting people know that that's okay to have those structures and to create those boundaries. Okay. My friend Daniel Patterson is an administrator and educational expert, and I borrowed some of this thinking from him in terms of what we call learning blocks. And so I know a lot of you are doing homeschooling for the first time. And what we're encouraging is for middle schoolers and high schoolers to do no more than 2 to 3 60 to 90-minute learning blocks per day. You have to remember that if your kids are in a public school or private school setting, they're there for 6 or 7 hours a day, but they're not in class that whole time. They make time in there for kids to have lunch together, have some socialization, have transitions and warm down time, and other types of physical activity, going outside and homeroom time. So I don't want you to think like I have to fill up 7 hours a day. Most homeschoolers actually get most of their work done in half a day, and then they're done with the rest of the day. And I want you to think in the same mindset. So if you have a kiddo who's like 6th grade or younger, you might have like 2 or 3 45-minute blocks. And that means you don't have to cover every subject every day. And then with your older kids to have 2 or 3 90-minute blocks. Some schools are providing some outlines and some supports, others are not. And, what I want you to do is just pick 1 or 2 platforms. Like if your school uses Google Classrooms, great. If you want to use, some Scholastic stuff or Khan Academy or a university that's offering some free classes, but don't feel like you have to there's so much free resource and support right now. Don't feel like you have to take all of that in and do everything to make this amazing learning experience. I try to sit down with my kids either the night before or the morning of. We look at these 3 learning blocks that they have during a day. We check Google Classroom to see if their teachers have posted anything. Otherwise, we make stuff up. So for instance, my son who's doing his online learning, his social studies teacher hadn't posted anything. That's okay. I'm not upset with his social studies teacher. She actually has a dad who's recovering from cancer right now. She's probably really busy taking care of him. But I do know that we taped a bunch of World War II documentaries on our DVR. And my son loves learning about World War II. And so his social studies learning blocks right now are watching those movies and then writing me a few things that he's learned about it. So it doesn't have to be worksheets. It doesn't have to be, rigid kind of academic instructional time. It doesn't even you don't have to be the teacher for them. You can utilize really creative ways. So let me give you a couple of other ideas that might get those creative juices flowing. I have friends of mine whose kids are taking AP Psych classes. And so they reached out and they're like, Amy, would you just talk to my high schooler about psychology and what they're learning? I'm like, absolutely. Will you do a trade for me and look at my daughter's English composition paper? Done, right? Their kid got exposure to someone that was kind of unique and different. And my kid didn't have to rely on me to be their teacher for a period of time. You can also do this for littles, right? My friend Daniel, who's doing this, and he's an educator, he's got little kids 2 and 4-year-olds. So he's created a space in his garage called a maker space. And if you're not familiar with that, that's anything that's in your house, found materials, like stuff from your recycling bin and Legos and paintbrushes and water and sand and dirt. And you're just making a space for them to learn and create. Because remember, kids that are younger, 0 to 8, their way that they learn is actually through play. And so again, it doesn't have to be you sitting down and teaching them their ABCs. It could just be them sitting in a creative learning space. And again, there's lots of resources out there for older kids, and it could be on any topic. There are so many universities offering some online courses right now. If your kid wanted to understand the microbiology of plants, I'm sure there is a free class for that right now. So the other thing you can do is just sit with your kids and do a little bit of brainstorming about what they'd like to learn about. my kid doesn't have access right now to his tech class. And so right now he's taking apart his remote control cars. My daughter's doing some knitting for the first time, and we're going to get out her sewing machine. So be really flexible about what these educational blocks look like. And remember, the last thing here is really important. If you ask any educator about what we call summer slide, meaning when kids are out of school, when we look at data, if we just have our children read, or for our pre-readers, if we read to them, the research shows that ameliorates most of summer slide. So let go of all of the stuff, right? If you are just reading to your kid every day, or you're having them read for an hour and talk to you about what they learned, just that in a given day would be enough, right? You're doing so much. And so if on a given day, all you guys did was read for an hour and talk about a book or listen to an audio tape and then go outside and garden and play and walk, that is an okay homeschooling day. Okay. I'm just trying to reassure you that homeschooling doesn't have to look perfect. All right. This is kind of more of that learning block. I'll just go over this quickly because I think I covered a lot of these ideas already, and I want to get to questions if we have them. So just a couple of service facing. For those of you that have high school students, I hadn't thought about this until I talked to an administrator recently. And what he said is, if you have juniors and seniors or sophomores and juniors, because most of our seniors are already heading off to college, if you have sophomores and juniors, they might use one of their learning blocks to do service-facing things that they could put on their resume, like reading to a younger sibling or a cousin on FaceTime. My son was on FaceTime earlier today doing Spanish practice with a little kid as a mentor. I had my kids sit down and write letters to a nursing home, so we're hoping that one of them gets a fun pen pal. I had a client of mine who was so sad and overwhelmed about the loss of things during her senior year, but we got her really excited and motivating by logging on to Bernie Sanders' website, and now she's doing phone calls for 2 hours every day to help with his political campaign. For little kids, they could offer to walk the dog for a neighbor that is homebound. They could go outside and do a chore for you. Actually, little kids like to help with chores versus our older kids who are a little bit resistant to that direction. But also remember that school should be social, and that especially for our middle schoolers and high schoolers, they're used to being around their friends every day. So create a homework cafe, have a bunch of friends or cousins hop online together. It's okay for them to be social. My friend did a trivia thing for his younger kids where he just made this scrappy like Jeopardy board, and he was quizzing them about phonics or words that start with P, words that start with D, and then they were earning like reading time and a later bedtime and popcorn and all that stuff. And older kids, you could pick a certain theme and stick with that. Also, and that's what I was saying before, you can enlist help from your friends because you have a whole community, hopefully, of your own support circles that are experts in their own right. So that's just kind of some other creative ideas. I know sometimes it's helpful to hear other ideas instead of just trying to recreate them all on your own. So your only goal right now as a parent is to just be good enough. You do not have to be a perfect parent. Like I said, you don't have to do things that are Instagram worthy. I don't want you taking pictures of your beautiful learning blocks and all the meals that you're creating and the garden that you planted and the volcano experiment that you did. Just know that you have to live in the now, do the best you can. Just by even like watching something like this and showing up, right? You're here, you're getting information and support. That tells me already you're a great parent because you're trying to find resources and information for yourself. Show up for your kids on a regular basis. And what I mean by do no harm is if we can just show up and be fully present, it actually can mitigate a lot of the anxiety that our kids have and help them build resilience. So for instance, the other night, I'm an essential personnel, so I had to go into my office and see some patients. And when I came home, I was met with a 15-year-old who was just in tears. She was sad. She was overwhelmed. She missed her friends. She didn't know how to do the online schooling thing. And I had been gone all day. So she didn't have that kind of anchor for her. All I had to do was show up and do no harm. And by that, I mean, I just showed up and I was fully present with her feelings. I asked her what's happening. I validated where she was. I asked her if she'd like some help in creating a plan. And before I know it, we set up a time for her to have some FaceTime with a really good girlfriend. And she was giggling in her bedroom and, was able to just kind of re-regulate herself. So just know that you showing up for your kids and listening is good enough. You are enough. You're a great parent. If you have friends that are, look like they're homeschooling experts and they're doing everything perfectly and they just love being home with their kids right now, just will you like unfollow them for a while on Facebook or Instagram, because that's not going to help your mental health. Or just don't check your social media for a while. Instead, subscribe to your friends that are like, just barely hanging on and making it through, and that they love you and they love the fact that you're imperfect, and reach out to them for support. And finally, just think about, like, what do I want my kids to remember on a given day? If the only thing I do is, provide some support, show up and validate feelings and get some exercise outside, that's enough right now. It is completely enough. And I think that's related to this other piece that I wanted to emphasize, which is celebrating the small wins. We can have little daily wins, and these are kind of, some of these are a little bit redundant, but, like a win that I had yesterday was just helping my son get through a science project. I had these like big dreams and expectations, and this teacher sent out this opportunity to do a science experiment, and we live out on a farm, and he could do like a million things. And you know what he wanted to do? He wanted to practice shooting with his BB gun. All right. Well, so we just, we went with that, and he was super excited. And then he went off, and he actually was working out in a fort for like 5 hours. And he ended up like marking off where he was going to do practice, shooting with his BB gun, and he was going to collect data. And it became something that I could not even have imagined. And so my small win yesterday was letting go of my expectations of what a science experiment should look like and letting him have some control. And that really helped me, like that fourth point there, just pick my battles, because at the end of the day, he was engaged for like 5 hours, and he ended up spending the night outside in his fort. And so I'm just trying to be okay with the small wins on a day-to-day basis. Whatever you do, keep it simple, and just know that this kind of structure and the ideas that I'm giving you helps promote thriving, resilient kids. Somebody asked me the other day when I was on a Zoom call, they're like, hey, it looks like you showered today. And I was like, yeah, I'm trying to get up every day at the same time and take a shower and put on some makeup, because that's what makes me feel like I have a schedule throughout the day. And making sure that our kids have some kind of a schedule as well, it helps them have that predictability. If we look at, POWs, if we look at people that have gone through long-term crises, right? Not just like a one-time event, but long-term crises, the people that create those structures that way they can have some expectations around what's going to happen and have that predictability and consistency actually fare better in terms of their mental health. So and it doesn't have to be perfect structure. Remember, I don't want you to make this elaborate schedule that's color coded with all these expectations. It might be we're trying to get up at about the same time every day, and we're logging on to e-learning at about 9 o'clock, and we're having lunch together. And, it can be very simple structure. It doesn't have to be perfect. All right. What else do I have to say here? Finally, you don't have to be entertainers for your kids. When we entertain our kids all day, we actually get in the way of them being creative and playful. So just let your kids have some time where they can be bored and play outside for a little bit of time. I think I mentioned this before, but create these separate areas of your house so that they know, like, this is mom or dad's workspace. This is where we hang out together. This is where we have meals together, and let go of some of the expectations. Like if you're usually pretty militant and you're like, we only do 2 hours of screen time a day, you might have to let go of some of that. Or, we always eat dinner at a certain time. Right now, my favorite phrase is ish. Like, we'll start school at 9-ish. I'll be done at about, 6-ish, because we have to be flexible right now. We weren't made to, like I said, be boarding school directors for our kids and our family all the time. These are just a couple of ideas to get connected with your family, going for walks or drives. There's no limitation right now from the state of Oregon that you can't go for a walk as long as you're socially distant from other families. It's beautiful outside. Take a drive on some backcountry roads. Maybe make a journal together of quarantine time and document some fun things that you've been doing to get through this time. You can always learn a lot when you go for a drive and let your kids be the DJ for a while. Hand them your iTunes or your Spotify account and ask them why they like to listen to the music that they did. I did this for a period of time last summer, and I actually listened to a lot of Drake and Kesha and learned a lot about the kind of music my kids like listening to. We're doing lots of baking and cooking, and we're calling that science and math right now because there's a lot of measurement and experimentation that goes into that. Play with your kids, right? Be playful. Tonight I have queued up some music. We're going to have a little dance party at our house. Probably only 2/4 of our family will participate and the other 2 will be grumbly about it. That's okay with me. Maybe I can, be silly enough that I'll get them to engage. And, just follow kids' lead, give them some time where, one of the things that creates anxiety is when we feel like we don't have any control. And so when we can give our kids like a morning where they get to pick the structure, that's a fun thing for them too. So I'm about ready to give you some time to ask questions here, but I want to first just go through what I call the parenting mantra. And I read this the other day when I was on an online webinar. And this is what I want you to kind of embrace over the next several weeks. I'm giving myself permission. I'm giving myself permission to be overwhelmed at times, to know that this is not normal, to need help, to ask for support, to create boundaries for myself by saying no to others, and to do what is healthy for myself first, my family second, and my other obligations last, by leaning in to what is right for us as a family. So I hope that rings true for some of you. I hope that that's something you can embrace, that there are permissions we need to give ourselves, that we didn't sign up for this. We didn't sign up to be these boarding school directors and homeschoolers and work from home experts, that it's okay to be overwhelmed and it's okay to need support right now. So in case you would like to find me more and reach out to me outside of this group, I have a Facebook group. I have an Instagram account. I actually have a private Facebook group too for divorced or separated moms called The Kids Will Be Okay. You can email me. And I also have an ongoing workshop right now called, now my brain is so full with information, called Ditching Homeschool Perfection and Embracing Good Enough. And so we're actually still taking new members, and we're meeting on every Tuesday night. And it just is continual support about exactly what I'm talking about, which is balancing this homeschool craze with our own sanity and being a good enough parent. But those are all the ways you can find me. I'd love to get to know more of you after this. My Facebook and my Instagram, of course, are free. You can pop questions into that at any time. I go on and do Facebook Lives every week and provide free resources and information. And like I said, on my website, you can go to the blogs. There's tons of free information there about scripting and discipline and all the things that help us all be good parents. So with that, I'm going to just leave the last 10 or 15 minutes. If there are questions that people have, I'd be happy to field some of those. And if they're not, that's okay. You can go on to being imperfect parents, I hope.
Well, Amy, thank you so much for that incredible information. I know I myself, I don't have a young kid at home. I have a college age adult at home, but wow, did I find a lot of that information helpful, especially the worry circle, the worry pie. And I was actually wondering, like, you said just being more mindful of like not spending all your headspace in the 75% of the worry pie that we can't control. So I don't know if you have any tips and tricks for like when we find ourselves in those 75% that we can't control, how do we transition to the 25% to the now? Is there anything that will help our brains sort of switch?
Yeah, really good question. And so I think one of the things is just being more aware of the fact that that's happening all the time, right? So if you can just know that at any given moment, I only have a certain amount of energy in my bucket. And if I can identify, okay, where are my worries coming from right now? I'm noticing that I'm spending some time right now worrying. That's the first thing, just acknowledging that worry is occurring. The second thing is identifying which bucket that falls into. Is that a past worry? Is that a future worry? Is it an out of control worry? If it's any of those, we have to set it aside and compartmentalize it for just a moment, and then say to ourselves, okay, so I, first of all, identified that I was having all these worries. Second of all, I identified that it's in one of those 75% buckets that I can't do anything about. So that must mean that I need to be more focused on the right now. And what can I do right now in this moment? Like what kind of a worker do I want to be right now? Or what kind of a colleague, or what kind of a parent, or what do I need to do for self-care? Because I want you to imagine that every day you wake up and you have an energy bucket, right? And maybe right now we're operating on like 75% or 50% of what we would typically have because we're under crisis. And every day you have to decide, how am I going to spend the energy that's in this bucket today? And if you first recognize that you're having one of those worries from the other 75% of the pie, then you have to decide, okay, gosh, I'm actually using this very precious energy source on something I can do nothing about. I don't want to waste my resources and energy. So I've got to refocus that to what I can do right now in this moment. And I want you to identify, like, what is the thing I'm supposed to be working on right now? And like I said to you guys earlier, like my only job right now is to show up and do the best webinar that I can right now. So if I'm focused on what already happened today or what's going to happen later today, I'm actually not servicing this very well. And so I think the first thing, just to review, is catch yourself. Notice that you're spending some time in that headspace, right, where you're thinking about all the things. Recognize what kind of a worry is it, name it, right? We psychologists have this cheesy phrase that we say, name it to tame it. And so name it, oh, that's a past worry, or that's a future worry, or that's a worry about somebody else's behavior. And if you're in any of those buckets, it's a shift to, okay, I remember the worry pie thing. I'm supposed to be focused on the right now. And it seems, again, really straightforward. And it's hard to practice at first, but the better we get and the more often we try to focus on identifying where we're at and shifting to the now, we actually get better at it.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Amy. That was super helpful. So I am going to go through some of the comments and questions from some of our audience members. And first of all, I just want to say that, I mean, wow, we have so many comments from viewers saying, thank you for this really practical, helpful information. People loving the idea of just giving permission to parents to just do their best and not be perfect. There's a question about whether or not you're going to do any other webinars, and that came in before you put your page up there about your business. And so again, we'll post the link to Dr. Amy's website where you can go for more information. And then perhaps I might be able to twist Dr. Amy's arm to maybe do another webinar for us here on Combat COVID-19, because I think that this is exactly the type of information that people are really interested in. So we did have a question from Erin, and Erin asks, you know, she loved the idea that you said about the high school student who just needed something to kind of get over their grief and really got into, like, for example, doing some political stuff for Bernie Sanders, for example. And so she was wondering, like, do you have any other ideas and ways to motivate high schoolers who are maybe just like devastated that their senior year is a mess? So ways to get them motivated to, like, engage in whatever else it is.
Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, I think if you have all these expectations of how your senior should be feeling or what they should be doing, you've already lost. Okay. So instead, if you can just know that they are allowed to have their own grief cycle right now. And even though as adults, we can look at a senior and go, you know, gosh, missing your graduation or missing your prom, that's not that big of a deal. Like, people are dying and, you know, there's this pandemic across the world. Guess what you've just done? You've just invalidated your senior and their own grief experience. And one thing that I know for sure is that we can't compare pain. Okay. So the pain of my client that's mourning the loss of not being able to go through and walk across a stage to graduate, I can't compare that to the pain of somebody else whose mother just died from the virus. Both of those pains that those people are experiencing are valid and need to be acknowledged. So that's the first thing. The second thing is do a little bit of like what I call drilling down or digging in with that person about like, well, what are you motivated about? Like with that teenager, that senior that I was just talking about that did the Bernie Sanders thing, when I first started talking to her, boy, she was down in the dumps. She was like, you're the only human outside of my family that I've talked to today. I feel like my life is purposeless and pointless right now. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Let's talk about some things you're passionate about. Like, tell me 3 passions that you have. And she said to me, soccer, political science, and her friends. So we just took each of those and we took like 5 minutes to brainstorm. And I said, any idea is okay. I know it might feel kind of cheesy, but like, let's just brainstorm everything you could do in each of those 3 spheres. And so like with soccer, she was like, I could get online and I could do an Instagram live for kids to teach them how to do like soccer taps on a soccer ball, and people could subscribe to that. And then we went to the Bernie Sanders thing. She said, when we were talking about politics, she said, I love Bernie Sanders. And we were on a Zoom call like this. And I said, let me pull up my screen. I'm going to share it with you. And I went to the Bernie Sanders website and I'm like, oh my gosh, look, you can actually go online right now and like volunteer to make calls for his campaign tonight. And all of a sudden she just lit up and she was like, I can do that like right now. And I'm like, absolutely right now. And then the third thing we brainstormed, because she was saying her third passion was friends, is that she's been trying to mobilize some seniors who are natural leaders in her senior class to begin brainstorming what graduation could look like, assuming that they're not going to be able to have this big celebration. And so she's been working with like her student council and other leaders that are in her school. So that's one idea, is just, first acknowledge the pain and then get into a place of brainstorming. Another idea around that motivation place is, again, if you can let them drive it from their passions and then just brainstorm within that and ask them to just like sit with you in a space that every idea is okay, then I think we'll meet them where they're at versus us as adults imposing on them what we think they should do or how they should be motivated.
Awesome. Great. Thanks for that awesome information, Dr. Amy. So for our viewers that are still on the live show, do you have any other questions for Dr. Amy that you would like her to discuss before we wrap up today? We'll just give folks a couple minutes. Just type in your questions in the comment thing and we can view them, and I'll pose them to Dr. Amy. So we'll wait for just a minute. But in the meanwhile, I did want to give a shout out to our productions that's helping us do these beautiful live events. Please visit our Facebook page and like it. We have a schedule of events. You can see all the upcoming events. We're adding new ones every day. Also, we are going to, starting tomorrow, be also broadcasting to YouTube as well as to Facebook, so you can view those in both places. And we did just get a comment that came in from Lucy that said she loved the volunteer idea. So thank you for that.
Good. Let me give you one other little idea that was super fun, Dawn, that might inspire people. And then if there are no more questions, that's no problem. But the volunteer idea is a super fun thing for teenagers right now because we need to feel purposeful. And when we feel purposeful, we feel more competent, and that builds resilience. So I was brainstorming with another kiddo the other day, and she actually lives in a suburban area where she has, neighbors within walking distance, obviously. And she was feeling really sad after watching a news cycle about the Oregon Humane Society, and that they were having to make really tough decisions about what to do with animals and fostering animals and not having a lot of food and treats and stuff like that coming in. And so she was like, I asked her what she was passionate about. We found out what she was motivated by. And then I just said to her, you know what would feel really purposeful to you? And so what she ended up coming up with is that she was going to print how to make homemade dog treats. She printed it. She wrote down all of it, like how to multiply by 3s and 4s and 5s if people wanted to make really big bulk orders. She put it in baggies. She put the 8x11 sheet of paper in gallon Ziploc baggies and delivered it to 20 neighbors. And she just said, if you want to work on this project with me, here's a homemade dog treat recipe. I'm going to come by in 48 hours to pick up any dog treats that you make. You can text me at this number to let me know you're participating. And she literally had 20 pounds of dog treats. that she and her family then drove to the Oregon Humane Society and dropped off for them. And she felt, I mean, first of all, it took a whole day to do all of this. And second of all, she felt like she had done a service not only to her immediate community neighborhood, but also she did something that was really special for dogs, that she was, again, feeling really sad and purposeless. And it just shifted her from that to feeling really purposeful.
I love that. Great. Well, it doesn't look like we have any other questions, but Erin, who posed that question, did chime in and say thank you so much for that information. And again, Dr. Amy, thank you so much for being here today on Combat COVID-19 Community Support. And we hope our audience will join us for our other events later this week. And we'll see if we can talk Dr. Amy into doing another one of these in the coming weeks. And so everyone, take care and stay safe and healthy, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you.